We hear a ton about the incredible potential of artificial general intelligence, AGI. But what actually happens to our economy when it truly arrives? Today, we're diving into that potential economic shockwave and why it might just be a crisis totally unlike anything we have ever faced before. Just let that question sink in for a second. It cuts right to the heart of all the anxiety surrounding AGI, doesn't it? See, this isn't about a system breaking down, like in a financial crisis. It's about a system working so perfectly that it just doesn't need humans in the loop anymore. So, the first thing we absolutely have to get our heads around is that the disruption from AGI is in a league of its own. We can't just map it on to past economic problems. It's fundamentally different. And in this first section, we're going to explore exactly why.
And this right here is the core distinction. In past crises, like 2008 or even the Great Depression, the problem was about capital. The financial plumbing of the system was broken, but nobody questioned whether humans were still capable of doing valuable work. The AGI scenario completely flips that script. The system itself might be running hyper-efficiently, but the thing being challenged is our very competence, our economic reason for being, and that's a much, much deeper problem.
This leads us to a really strange, powerful contradiction, something we're calling the demand paradox. It's this bizarre scenario where creating unbelievable abundance could, paradoxically, be the very thing that triggers an economic collapse. So how on earth does that work?
Well, here it is in a nutshell. Imagine AGI lets companies produce almost anything you can think of for nearly zero cost. Sounds great, right? But here's the catch. If that same AGI has put millions of people out of a job, who has a paycheck to buy all this amazing, abundant stuff? You create a massive boom in supply at the exact same moment, you create a devastating bust in demand. It's a perfect economic storm.
And this wouldn't be some slow-moving thing. It's more like a chain reaction, a series of dominoes falling one after another. First, AGI causes mass labor displacement, which just decimates incomes. That's domino number one. With no income, people stop spending money. Consumption collapses. That's the second domino. And it's a huge one because consumer spending is the engine of our economy. Next, that shockwave slams into company revenues. That's domino number three. And the final domino? The government is suddenly facing a massive crisis with falling tax revenues and the very real threat of social unrest, forcing it to do something.
You know, this core idea isn't entirely new. It's just being amplified to a level we've never seen. This quote really nails it. Capitalism has always had this built-in tension point. It breaks when our ability to produce stuff wildly outpaces people's ability to actually buy it. AGI just pushes that dynamic to its absolute logical extreme. Okay, so that's the theory, but what could this actually look like in practice? What do the numbers say? Well, based on the analysis, we can actually model three very distinct scenarios for what widespread white-collar job loss could do to the economy. All right, let's just walk through this. At a 30% displacement level, it feels like a really severe recession. Think 2008, incredibly painful, but the system probably survives. But if you jump to 60%, we're in a full-blown structural crisis. The economy can't fix itself at that point without massive policy intervention, like some form of wealth redistribution. And at 90%, well, now we're looking at a shock potentially larger than the Great Depression, one that would force us to redesign our entire economic system from the ground up. And of course, a collapse in demand like this would send absolute shockwaves through the stock market. I mean, look at these numbers. In the worst-case scenario, we could see a staggering 50 to 70% drop in the broader market. And that's not just a number on a screen, that's retirement accounts, pension funds, everything. And this could happen even while a handful of core AI companies are thriving. But here is the single most important variable in all of this. It's not just what happens, it's how fast it happens. Speed. If this displacement unfolds over, say, 2 decades, we'll probably have time to adapt. But if it happens in just 3 to 5 years, that rapid, concentrated shock is what carries the very real risk of genuine social and political collapse. So this brings us to a massive fork in the road. When the shock hits, society is going to face a very stark choice between two paths. Either we figure out how to redistribute the immense wealth that AGI generates, or we risk a complete systemic rupture. At its heart, this is about the social contract. For centuries, our whole system has been built on a simple premise. You contribute your labor, you earn an income.
But if AGI makes human labor economically optional for millions, that contract is broken. The system has to shift. Income has to be reconnected to something else. And the most logical candidate is ownership of the productive AI assets themselves.
This then becomes the central political question of our time. Who owns the productivity gains from AGI? Is it a small number of corporations and their shareholders, or does society as a whole have a stake in this new engine of wealth? Honestly, the answer to that single question will define the 21st century.
And look, these aren't just abstract ideas anymore. There are concrete policy proposals on the table right now designed to solve this very problem. You've heard of things like universal basic income or an AI dividend paid to all citizens from a public fund that owns AI companies, or even regulating AGI as a public utility. These are no longer science fiction. They are becoming plausible economic tools for this new era.
But this is about so much more than just GDP and stock prices. The deepest shock of all might not be economic, but psychological. It's about our identity, our status, and our sense of purpose.
I mean, think about it. For generations, our identity has been so deeply tied to our profession. What do? It's the first question we ask. It defines our place in society. When that is stripped away from millions of people almost overnight, you don't just get a recession. You get a profound crisis of meaning, which can be far more destabilizing.
This is where value itself might completely shift. When intelligence becomes a cheap, abundant commodity, new things suddenly become scarce and therefore incredibly valuable. And what are those things? Well, they're the things AI can't easily replicate: genuine trust, deep human connection, authenticity, governance, and the creation of meaning. The economy of the future might totally reorient around these uniquely human scarcities.
And it's worth remembering. We've navigated massive identity shifts like this before. We went from hunter to farmer to industrial worker to the knowledge worker of today. Every single one of those transitions was disruptive and painful, but each time we managed to redefine our value. AGI is simply forcing the next and perhaps the most profound transition in our entire history. And so we end with the ultimate question. It's not an economic one, it's a philosophical one. If our intelligence is no longer our key economic advantage, what does it even mean to be human? How we choose to answer that is going to shape the century to come.